Say that again.
I said, what's up, Mike?
Not much, Robbie. How are you, buddy?
Making me do double takes already?
Yeah, I wasn't recording quite yet. That was a quick jump in. I had just called you and it was giving me some strange sound.
Huh.
Anyway.
Like the old school AOL?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that.
Yeah, that one, yeah. I was busy. I was in a triathlon chat room. I was a little busy at the time.
Oh, what are you chatting about?
No, that's a total joke. I was kidding.
Oh. So I had a quick question for you. I was thinking about this on my run the other day, and I was thinking back to the last Ironman marathon, and I remember being about, 2 miles to go on, what was a tough day, right? I mean, they all are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're all tough.
And I remembered, because I was out running, and I was having the same feeling, I think. It was sort of that long run I was on, and as I got within 2 miles of the finish line at Ironman, over 140, around 138 miles for the day, I started feeling kind of sad that it was over. Have you ever had that feeling?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's pretty common. I mean, I think while the last 2 miles is like, just excruciatingly painful, I think at the same time you're like, oh man, like, yay, this is physically about to be over, and this is kind of sucks and sad because it's about to be emotionally and mentally over. And nobody kind of likes it. It is kind of a buzzkill, especially if you don't have any plans afterwards. That's why so many people, sign up right after a race or are so quick to pull the triggers, because they need that something else to kind of latch onto. Because and the longer they wait, then they won't train. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty common. For me, it is, and at least at this last one, it was more of a thank God this is over with. Yeah, I was more happy than anything. I was my mind was sidetracked anyway. I was trying to get to the finishing chute with enough time to give Hayden a kiss and still make it under a certain time threshold. And so once I made that, I was kind of all golden. But no, I totally get that.
Yeah, I think that's the double entendre or something. Of course, I felt I wanted it to be over, but I did have this rush of wow, man. Like, it's over. It's almost like a mini retirement or something like that. It's like the end of the job that you hated, maybe, but you realize that, man, it's a whole different landscape that's just waiting ahead. But
yeah, you still have to wake up the next day and go on with your life.
Yeah, and I just thought maybe that little tidbit would sort of transition into what we had both talked about. I mean, I think we both kind of had these same thoughts last night or something about when we were trying to come up with our new podcast topic. And you had kind of texted me about how triathlon and Ironman can consume people. And my thought was similar in the sense that I was thinking about maybe doing a podcast called Ironman Addiction. And I don't know, so what was on your mind when you were thinking about that? I mean, do you have a...
I mean, I think what you said, they're all kind of the same thing. I mean, there are so many addictions in this world these days, and so many vices that are so easily, like, available, that, I had... that I was going through some notes that I had in my journal, and just with some text back with a few athletes, and it's like, man, it's like this can, if you don't treat this, if you don't treat any sport or any endeavor or any goal or hobby with mindfulness and respect, it can become very isolated, and it can become very lonely. Into where you kind of retreat to within yourself, and everything is graded, but not on a physical, human, relationship kind of way. I think we all crave for connection, and I just think now the world that we live in, it's all digital, and I think there's just something, And I'll speak for me. Is like this podcast has helped me tremendously. More so, maybe even it's probably done more for me than it has for all the people listening. Because I feel like although I'm not specifically talking to another person outside of you, it gives me a way to connect and get points across. So there's something different in listening to people versus reading. And so, I think the sport in general can just be very lonely and isolating. And I think that tends to take people, not in the greatest directions, but I also feel like it can be kind of also a safe harbor depending on how it's approached. But it was just something that was on my mind. And just an article that I had read, that one I sent you from Outside Magazine about, Strava is like killing the loneliness of running.
Yeah.
And I went on a run this morning with my dog, and I was just like, man, this is so great. Like, I had not a care in the world, and like, I wasn't looking at my watch, I wasn't looking at anything. It was like, for me, it used to be swimming. Like, I could. You don't fix the world's problems when you're swimming, but you kind of get to work things out in your mind, and that's what kind of running does for me. But that's kind of what got me. Going on a topic for that today.
Yeah, the mindfulness component has always been huge for me. And don't you think that I feel like a lot of people that get into triathlon and Ironman are kind of people that would isolate by nature, and I think that is a nice way to, I always talk about it like running off into the sunrise or something like that, and it's a good way to, reflect and obviously think about what's going on. But it is almost like juxtaposing this idea of escaping and or just being mindful. And I think certainly when I started, it was like the coolest new thing for me, because I would just kind of get in it's almost like I was always in my head a lot, but now I could be in my head with the blood pumping, and there's something really powerful about that, because it helps you sort things out and what have you. But I wanted to go into, because I'm not really familiar with the Strava thing, and I was just wondering if you could maybe kind of break that down, how that works a little bit. I haven't even used it, and
I don't use it either.
Okay.
But I've had a few athletes that I've banned from it.
So.
Just because, I have some people who are in Strava recovery currently, and it's basically an app and a software, I guess, where you're always competing against another person. So like if you leave your house and you're running around East Nashville, or you hit the lab and somebody's got a 1 mile stretch that they've tagged as a segment. Well, if you run that segment or ride that segment faster, then you'll get like some alert, like you just took over whatever position, or you beat, like let's say it's Jim or somebody else, had done that. You're like, oh, I beat you on that specific segment.
Yeah, so it's like constant racing.
Constant racing, basically, and it's also like, if it's a like king or queen of the mountain, I guess, like if you're the fastest to make it up. This climb, you're the king of the mountain or whatever. So you're always competing, even against people who aren't even there. And it's like, and then you have all these apps and softwares and software now like Z-Swift, and where you can ride inside against virtual other people across the world. And it's like, so even like when you're out on a run by yourself, if you're on that Strava, because it automatically uploads, then everybody's going to see it. And I think there's a ton of downfall to that just in general, because people are so wired to want to always beat people. That's why people kind of overrun and overtrain, is because they don't want to see you running a 10-minute mile and think that you're some slowpoke, when in reality you're probably just doing the correct workout for the day. And so it's got a lot of downfalls, I think. But I think it just in general takes away from what running, I think does for people that is really, really good.
No, yeah, and I totally agree. But I could also see how it could be a motivator, and that side of the coin. But I'm not, necessarily agreeing with that philosophy. One of the things when I got into running, for the first time in my life at age 48 or whatever, the one thing I kept harping on, and I wrote, on crushingiron.com, I have, hundreds of blog posts, and a lot of them have this sort of tone, is that the cool thing, I'd always played competitive sports, team sports my whole life, and one of the coolest things I thought about running and getting into that world is, even though a lot of people are always doing races, there wasn't this sort of intense competition with each other, because 9 times out of 10 those competitions don't really matter. They're not really, the competing for the victory. But most people in running seemed to me like they were more interested in competing against themselves. And so now we're talking about all this technology again, is just kind of putting that fire under everybody and turning every bit of potentially enjoyable spiritual growth moment or personal growth moment into a competition again. And that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think it's continual expectations. And it's like, people always, this day and age, like I think that people have this just general fear of not being relevant or not being, vital to somebody else's day. And, it could be through social media, it could be through work, it could be through relationships. It's like, what makes me relevant? What makes me, almost necessary, in another person's world, or a Facebook group or a forum or a podcast. It's like, what is going to make me matter more today, at least to those around me and their perception, instead of, what can I do for myself today, that's going to make myself feel good. And that's really all that I need, and that's really all that matters is, I'm doing the work that's required. And if I know that I did my best, then why, I shouldn't feel that I have to justify or explain why or what I did and why, and the reasons behind it.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day about this concept of growth in society, and when you think, like, I came out of the corporate world, and they always say, well, how are we going to continue to grow? How are we going to? And to me, that always feels like it's tied to money. And in the corporate world, it's like, how we had 200% increase last year. How are we going to grow that up? And I think that in a way, this whole competition on a daily basis for times is sort of analogous to growth for money. And it doesn't really pay attention to, like, how are we becoming a better organization and a more useful organization in the world to other people. And then back to the personal growth is, how am I becoming a long-term healthier person, clearer person, more mindful, and just a better person in general. So I think that, it's putting that carrot out there, that sort of like that shiny gold piece is your time. And I mean, I do think obviously that does motivate people to get faster, and I think that's a good thing too. That's why I don't want to kind of bash on all this stuff. Really, I think that there's value in those types of goals, and we've been talking a lot about it with the podcast. It's like, we don't, want to put our eye on like some big prize. We just want to sort of do the best thing we can and keep getting better and grow organically and with a function in mind,
Yeah, I mean, I think, everything that you do should have some sort of genuine purpose behind it. And I agree with you that in the business that I'm in is, not the coaching aspect, but my day-to-day business. Like, how can we grow? How can we, what can we grow? But ours isn't a vision of how can we grow financially. It's how can we reach more people? What can we do to set ourselves up to be able to reach a larger population to therefore enable us to help more people? And I'm blessed enough to work for a company and for an owner who that's their vision too. It's like you love people, you take care of people, you treat people with respect and always do your best. And if you just genuinely have a good heart and want to succeed and help people, then everything comes back around.
Yeah.
And you're really, it's more of a, they call, I guess, servant being a servant leader. It's not what can you do for me, it's what can I do for you. How can I help you? And that's also, I guess kind of how I take approach to my coaching too. It's not your job to listen to me. It's my job to listen to you. And, figure out where your mind is, figure out where your body is, figure out what you're doing, and then, give you suggestions. And, there'll be, maybe a stern suggestion here or there, but, it's not to be a dictator. And that's why I say it's not a training plan, it's a relationship, but, if I'm not listening to you and I don't learn it's all about listening, I think, and if I'm not listening to and learning about you as a person, then, we're not really going to probably grow together. And I often find that with the athletes I have that are married, that I oftentimes have like a very, very strong characteristic resemblance to their spouse. Okay. And that just because that's how they get along. And that they know how to read the other person, and they click because they're kind of opposites. But I think it's important in a relationship to have that. But that's where I come from a business standpoint. It's more of a servant-minded aspect, and I think that's a attribute and a method that we can all take when it comes to endurance sports. Is like, this is my hope for the podcast. Is like, how can we help as many people as we can? How can my run today? How can that help me?
Yeah.
How can that help me mentally, emotionally, physically, and, for a lot of people, spiritually in a certain way, instead of serving another goal, which is really, it's like the opposite. You're serving others by choosing to not serve and take care of yourself, by always, having to compare yourself and what you do against what somebody else does.
Yeah, man, it's like what we talked about many times before about the posting your workouts on Facebook. This is almost like posting workouts on steroids in the sense that it's ongoing and omnipresent. It just keeps going. And when I don't know. I know that when I find myself enjoying my runs or rides the most, it's when I'm clearly in the moment. And like you're saying, I really do think about how to incrementally get better every time I run. And I think about things like being light on my feet and finding the best running form and things like that. I'm thinking about stuff like that, and it puts me in the moment rather than thinking about how fast am I going to get to this place and what am I going to, and then I got to worry about how I'm going to feel after that and if that's going to lead or help my next workout or whatever. So I don't know. It just gets kind of crazy out there sometimes, but
yeah. I guess another thing that got me thinking about it was this Antonio Brown thing with Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
If you're living here in the good old U.S. of A., we have football and with the pigskin, not the circular one, and he goes out and they win this huge playoff game, and it's a huge moment, and his head coach and the leader of the team and the quarterback is talking for like 17 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he was more consumed with sharing that moment with everybody else in the world than he was absorbing it for himself.
Yeah.
And it was more about what can everybody else see through me than what do I see through the moment that I'm in right now. And that was more important. And I think that's a true indicator of where we are as a society is like and you see it all the time. You see it on Twitter, you see it on Facebook. I'm sure you see it on Instagram, everywhere. It's like, how many followers can I get so I can brand myself as something that is going to somehow benefit me personally, whether it's financially or sponsorship or whatever it is. And that's another thing that got me thinking about it. I was like, man, you got a one person in the back of the room filming this and looking at himself on the phone, thinking about how many people are going to like it and share it. And then you've got a guy on the front row on a knee who's been sweating and gave his all. And the only person he's looking at is his teammates and the coach and the quarterback, and taking the whole moment in. So I think it's virtually impossible to simultaneously share a moment and be in the moment and do it at the same time and get something great from it personally and also to do for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I kept hearing about that, and I ended up watching a little bit. I couldn't even watch much, but I have to, keep in mind that while I don't, I agree with it, I guess. I have to keep in mind that, man, that is what we're doing, that is what's going on so much in the world. And even, with this podcast, we're trying to get attention through Twitter and things like that. But we have always been kind of aware of that. And, we joke about stuff like, our approach to never get sponsors and things like that, because, I mean, in a way, I like that as a guide, because I don't want to go that way. You know what I mean? Like that look at me sort of way, because that to me is just like an endless, quest. You can't get enough. I mean, it's always more attention that you need. Or like, I mean, this guy just he got into the, championship game, and like he needs more than that. You know what I mean? It was just so weird to me that he like, it's like that wasn't enough attention for him to be watched by 50 million people or whatever watch that game, and now he's got to go and get personal and, like you're saying, not absorb his moment at all and get pleasure from it, but just keep going for another high. And that's the addictive part of something out there. And so I do want to talk, because from an like, as someone who's very aware of addictive tendencies and deals with them and has them, and my father went through AA so long ago, and so I've just always been steeped into that culture and aware of things like that and curious about them. And I wanted to get your opinion, because it seems to me like a lot of people actually get into triathlon to soothe or escape sort of addictive tendencies, and sort of substitute for bad behavior. You think that's true?
Yeah, I think I think it probably happens, to be honest with you, much more than we'll probably ever know. And I think that's just the nature of being in recovery in general, is that it is so anonymous that you'll really never truly know unless you're really kind of in that inner circle who is actually in recovery. And then you're like, oh, wow. Like, I mean, there's a lot more people in recovery in the United States than people would ever even imagine, just because they don't talk about it. But so that would also percentage, I would imagine, would hold true in sports. And I think especially in endurance sports, where you can, I think the ability to for a person to latch on to a sport is a good thing and a bad thing. If they come from an addicted background, because if you can become addicted to one thing, you can very easily become addicted to another.
Sure.
And so I think that's a kind of a fine line depending on where people are, but in their recovery. But I do think it is a very, very popular entryway for anything endurance, whether it's cycling, running, swimming. People like pain. And let me rephrase that. And I'll just speak for myself. I'm over 3 years sober, and I know that it's not so much that I like pain; it's just that it's very familiar to me. And I think that's the main attraction, is now that pain, and not so much from mine was always drinking, and so that I was always not just familiar with that kind of pain that would cause me, but the things that always led to it, things I had in my childhood, trauma I had in my life. Like, pain has always been familiar. It's what I know.
Yeah.
And and that also breeds having this kind of what they call like a survivor mentality. And I think that translates really well to this sport when it comes to being resilient and just being able to endure pain both mentally, emotionally, and obviously physically, and just survive. It's something you're accustomed to, and now you can kind of do it, hopefully, in a healthy way, and approach it to where you're doing it for good, and using it as kind of a positive outlet to, not only for your body to stay healthy, but to also connect with other people who are a positive influence in your life.
Yeah, that is a huge part of it. That connection piece, and you think about Ironman and how that sort of becomes the epitome of the triathlon circuit. I know there's longer, and they're adding more, like the doubles and the triples and stuff like that. It's like, you wonder, it's like, wow. I mean, how far can you go? I mean, you look.
It's everybody has an addictive personality.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in some ways. So things are never enough, and so you've always got to go bigger because, where else can you go if you don't have that?
Yeah, it's like I wonder how many people do sprints anymore. It's almost like the sprint triathlon becomes like the challenge to just have one drink. You know what I mean? It's like, can you enjoy doing a little sprint, or is that enough for you?
Yeah.
Or do you got to keep pouring on Ironmans, doing 2 or 3 a year now? And again, I don't want to look at it as a bad thing, because I think that if you can keep, and I still haven't figured it out, but a healthy approach to a good pattern and how this training can enhance your life, because I've seen just so many people get overloaded with it, because it becomes so daunting. It's like you keep going and keep pressing down these crazy, like you said, almost painful avenues, and then it ends up in the long run being something you just want to walk away from. And I think that's been our goal all along, is to kind of prescribe or create our own ways of enjoying it to the point where we can do it for a long time and enjoy it the whole time, rather than feel like it's a masochistic quest to just get something done, right?
Yeah, I think that there's, and it's true with all things, and like I'll be the first to admit it. I mean, like, I've gone through more, like, triathlon has served more purposes for me in my life than I ever would have imagined. They always say that, like, people are in your life for a reason. And you might not always be friends with them, but at a certain time in your life, like, they're there for a reason, and they were there to serve, something good. And I believe that, and I believe that about relationships too. Like, they always teach you something, and to hopefully take on the next. And triathlon for me, I mean, it has been, a place where I've spent, hours thinking of awesome things and how much life is great. And it's been places that I've used as a refuge, to isolate and be lonely. And, there are triathletes that I've just, over the course of 10 plus years that I've just turned up and hated. And there are ones that I've just turned out and loved,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just how life is. And, I think one of the things that I always fear with the sport is that it brings out the best and the worst, with people. I know it has with me. I think I'm finally on that end of where it's the best, like, brings out the best in me, and I want to use it how it was to hopefully bring out and save people from the bringing out the worst part. It's like, that's the biggest thing I want to take from a lot of the podcast we do is, like, learn from my lesson, learn from your lesson, and maybe I always think it's good for people to suffer a little bit, but not to a point to where it has to leave a mark. It's like a scratch is good, a mark, maybe not. But, I think it's just people's approach. And I think the biggest thing is that overconsumption of anything in life is a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that goes with every sport on the planet. And it goes to triathlon as well, and it goes from parents. I remember I coached a youth triathlon team a while back, and some of the parents after our first meeting were like, "Hey, how are you going to make my kid like the best? Like, are you going to make my kid the best?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to make my kid like the top?" I said, honestly, if you're,
it's up to your kid.
Well, what I said was if that's the kind of mentality you want me to have, then you need to look for a different team.
Yeah.
Because it's at first they're kids, but we're all at a place, I think, whether we want to admit it or not, that like doing your best should just be good enough. And why you want and just having like the mindset and the growth mindset too of just like I just want to get better every day. And if I can lay my head down at night and feel like, you know what, I did a pretty good job today. Like not my wife, my father-in-law has this saying that like, not every day has to be fancy.
That's good. I like that.
And it's so true. Like we use it all the time around the house. And I'm like, how was your day? It's, not every day has to be fancy. I'm like, and those are the good days, because if you expect every day of your life, whether it's training or in racing or with whatever, to be great, then you're never really going to appreciate the good ones.
Yeah.
The really, really good ones. And it's just like, hey, did I do the best I could today? I did. And that's all that I need to know. And I think that's where it can tend to shape people in the sport, is overconsumption of other people's dreams and and goals, and it's narcissism, to a point. And just you can't compare yourself to people all the time. I mean, you can, but you're never going to really know who you're comparing. You're not going to know yourself enough to compare to others because you're too busy comparing always to really even know who you are as a triathlete, or even as a person, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And this whole concept of, just doing as good as you can, I did my best today. I think sometimes, at least for me, sometimes I don't know what that is, and that's because of what you just said, is that I get out there and I'm comparing my best to someone else's best, and I get confused with, what I should be putting out there. And a lot of times when I'm in a good place, my best is simply feeling good after a workout, rather than feeling completely like I just thrashed myself. So those fine lines between knowing when to stop and knowing when to keep going. I'm notorious for doing this in the pool. I told you before, a lot of times, the pool can really wreck me if I try to get too fancy with my day. It's like if I'm like, all right, I'm ready, I feel good, and then I just push it, past the limit, it can wreck me for a couple of days, especially if I'm not in good swim shape. So there's often times when I just feel like I'm hitting my stride in the pool, and then I get out because I felt like I had good form going. I feel good mentally. It was a good day in the process, and it's a long process. One day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's and we use it all the time. It's like, one day at a time. Just do good today. Just do good enough. Do the work that's required and be okay with that. Yeah. And I think that in the sport that we're in and the time that we're in with is that people we're like right now we're connecting with hundreds and hundreds of people across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And while I love the reviews and I love the, that we get more downloads because I think we're reaching more people. My favorite thing are the emails.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The connection piece.
Exactly, the connection piece. And I've met and talked on the phone with multiple people because of this podcast, and connected myself with other people that I never would have done. And that's like, I know we kind of went off on this in the last one, but there's such this longing that I don't think people talk about to be connected. Yeah. I think that's why these sponsored whatever triathlon teams exist. Mm-hmm. Because you don't ever really meet hardly any of the people because they're scattered across the country and sometimes the world. Mm-hmm. You might chat with them on Facebook. You might do whatever, but I would love to know how many of them actually pick up the phone and call another one or talk to another one. So I do think there's this yearning to be connected with other people because, I think that's honestly, I think that's sometimes why expos and transitions are so awkward is that I think we all kind of know we're thinking the same thing, but you're too prideful to kind of talk about it and ask questions. Like, how do I do this? Like, I love when people ask me questions. I don't know the answer half the time, but I'm like, thank you for asking me questions. I would love to like chat for a second. And it's like, I always love it when it's a new person. Like, do you have any advice for today? Yeah, have fun. Like, don't worry about it. Have a good time. It's like we're all there for it's the most selfish sport on the planet. It just is. You're there for yourself. You train by yourself most of the time. Your times are for yourself. You race. You barely even talk to people. But so I think that there's like this huge missing piece in the sport where you have that connection, and it's like everybody comes together at these. I don't know, like these big meetings across the country of lonely, isolated triathletes where we can show you how much done we've worked by ourselves.
Yeah.
And they're called races.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, and I don't even know the answer. I wish I did. But it's like there's so much more I think we could do to connect with people. Like for me, like when I go into I guess this is where the best example I get. Like when I go into a room for AA, they might all be 30 strangers, but I never feel more at home.
Yeah.
You and I have gone to things before where you don't know people, but everybody talks about what they're going through, and like I've never felt so comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
And just where I am that, this just feels good, and it's like, but you go to races and there's so much anxiety and so much like quietness and nervous energy. And yeah, some of that's because you're about to compete. The other part of it, I think, is just the lack of being able to share reasons behind why you got there in the first place. And that's the part that I probably think we could, do a better job at.
That brings up the thing that, like, you guys, we joke about it a lot and all that sort of stuff. But I understand that, because before the race, there is the anxiety. There's kind of the focus and the nerves and do I have all my gear in the right place and nutrition, whatever it may be. You're running around to get ready and signed up and make sure your bike's ready. But to me, I wish that this happened more, that people would stay around a couple days after the race. And I'm going to propose it right now, because we're both doing Chat 70.3, and if anybody else is out there doing it right now, let's all look forward to maybe figuring out how to do a Crushing Iron hang-around, maybe where we stay a couple days afterwards, or at least the next full day, and just feel like we belong.
Breakfast the next morning. Somebody find us a good place and chat, and Monday morning we'll all get together and share our stories of not just the race, but how we got there. And that's the thing, is like I like to know like why people got there.
Yeah.
Like what got you through, and how it benefited your life, and what is the sport doing for you, to positively affect it and change it. Because that's the kind of stuff that gives me real hope and pleasure, is hearing that kind of stuff.
But yeah, because if you think about it, man, like what you said when you walk into an AA meeting, and that you've all been thinking very similar stuff. You're all kind of alike. You feel like, you're not alone. And the sport of triathlon is kind of like, all right, let's meet up and go for a 4.5-hour ride where we can't talk to each other, and then we get done and then say, see you later, or whatever. And I think that happens over and over and over again in this sort of desire to converse with, new people that have the similar backgrounds and similar thoughts, that just kind of doesn't happen very often. And it's like you're saying, it's the craving I think most people have.
Yeah, it's like the yearly conference for recluses.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, where can all of us isolated, lonely people go show up a couple times a year, wear some spandex, not talk to each other, judge each other on what they look like in said spandex, what their bike looks like, and if they make enough money, and what their time is. But I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm just going to do that in my mind, and then I'm going to walk away from the race and then get ready for another one by myself.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the exact opposite. you know, yeah, dude, it's messed up.
Man, one of my worst feelings is it's when I'm getting done. Well, I'm coming in on my run and I'm running past trucks and SUVs with bikes on the top of their truck leaving the grounds, and they're driving down the same road that I'm finishing my half marathon or marathon on, going well, it's usually a half because the roads are seemingly open a lot of times, but I'm running by them as they leave, and they're just going back home or whatever they're doing, and I'm going to get to the finish line and just look around and find, maybe if I'm lucky, one or two people to talk to.
Yeah.
But
it's all about yourself. But dude, nothing is worse than the cool down guy.
Yeah.
Like, I see you running the opposite direction, doing your 5-mile cool down after you won the race. Just go run somewhere else. Get away from me. I don't need to see your cool down. I'm like, how can you run 7-minute miles and have your medal and carry your trophy all at the same time? I get you're having a cool down. It takes me longer to get undressed and my stuff in transition than it does these people to do these 5-mile cool downs. Yeah. But everybody's but that's the thing is you don't even like to, share things. That's what I talk about all the time with my staff. I'm like, when we go out and do stuff, don't talk about work.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the rest of your life. If that's all you have to talk about, then maybe you need to kind of do a little bit of reflection. It's you can find great friends and great relationships and great motivation within sport, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And so, but you're right. That's why man, post day, except at an Ironman where everybody lines up for miles and miles and miles to wear finisher gear.
Yeah.
That's another just representation of. I want to show you what I did, not talk to you about it.
Right.
It's dude. Don't get me on that one.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's but again, I think that I understand it. I've been there, and I still fall into those places where that is sort of what it is. But I think it's like everything else. After you've been in it and around it for a while, you start to look at these things in a different way. It's kind of like back to your saying about in AA, people who have drank a lot, have tons of regrets, and there was sort of the gung-ho-ness of it all, but the regret, in some ways I look back on the over filling of the void I had with my early Ironman triathlon days and kind of regret it a little bit. But on the other hand, I know that that's just sort of part of the process of learning, and you got to go through those cycles to understand yourself. And that's what I think we're just trying to do here. And I don't think with this, it's back to the podcast and just talking about this stuff. There's really no agenda. I have, I got to put this out there because I just finished this film called Saving Banksy, and we're starting to it just came out in theaters, and it's starting to get reviews, and one of the reviews, and they've all been really good actually, except this one guy said something about this film would have been a better thesis if they had done this. And the point of it is, it's not a thesis, it's a documentary, and I'm not trying to prove a point, and I feel like that this is the same way with our podcast. We're just trying to open dialogue and create discussion amongst like-minded people that may have a lot of thoughts on their mind. And that's really how I feel about it, is this podcast is a way to kind of get the things out that we think about all the time, and now we're talking about them, and hopefully some people can identify with it and want to build a better community or connection.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, that's just, the reason why we started this was not to tell you what to do, but just open the discussion to letting you kind of figure it out yourself. Because I think that's the greatest way to grow, is just to do it on your own and figure out things on your own. Give you information, give you ideas, give you, a different way to approach things. It's there's so many people are quick to say that you're wrong, or that this is right and you're wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what's wrong with just being open and being like, all right, well, I'm open to listening to what you have to say, and then I'll just take what I need from it and what I feel is important from it, and then go from there. But yeah, I think that's definitely the route that we've taken, and I want to continue to do that. And if we have one email that comes back that is that helped them with this podcast, then we did a good job.
Yeah. Or again, the opposite is true too. If you guys have different thoughts and perspectives, I think that I'm totally open to listening to anything. I'm not 100% on anything revolving around triathlon. I think that's the whole point. I mean, you can read blogs from multiple professionals that are doing things totally different and whatever. There's always going to be a better way. So it's all about finding what's the best way for yourself, and and being open to learning. And that's where we're at. I think I'm learning a lot by doing this. Even though some of the things, it's like a learning process. You got to hear things a few times before it sort of sinks in the way that it makes sense. And that's what we're doing. I think we're just creating dialogue amongst ourselves and trying to understand this crazy world of triathlon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I love coaching so much, just because it's at least it should be an open dialogue. Because the more I coach, the more I learn.
Sure. That's what teaching is, man.
Yeah, it's what teaching is. You're always learning, and I think that's what I love so much about it, is you learn more about others, you learn more about yourself. And if you're always learning more and you're at least mindful of it, then you can take that and grow from it. And that's the most important part, I think, is that growth from it. And speaking of growth, I have one more roster spot on the Crushing Iron squad team for coaching this year. If anybody's interested, I cap it, and I've got one more spot. So if you're on the ledge, jump on in.
All right. Oh, good. Yeah. You got one spot. That's nice.
Yeah, one spot left. Yeah, before I cap it, because there's only so much me to go around.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have any inquiries, you can hit up crushingiron@gmail.com. And feel free to follow me on Twitter at Bruce_RTB.
Yeah, and we had been talking about this, and I'm ready to also offer almost coaching light, because I feel like you'll help me get some people started. But I'm looking, maybe at consulting or coaching the newer beginner type triathletes, and whether it be through phone conversations or emails and kind of basic plan layout and gear instruction, whatever it may be. So if you want to ask me about that as well, Robbie's going to be giving you the full-on coaching thing, and I'll be doing sort of a hybrid of that. So feel free to contact us at crushingiron@gmail.com, and I'm sure you'll get some of Robbie through me, or a lot of it. But
I hope a lot of it.
Yeah. So got that. I guess thanks for all the subscriptions and comments on iTunes. We could always use more. I think that's what helps get the word out. So feel free to do it. Contact us. Questions, bring it on.
Yeah, let us know how we can help, and we'll try to do better the next time. I'm super pumped about the podcast. We'll release on Monday. We'll talk nutrition, Ironman nutrition, triathlon nutrition, overall, health and wellness from a dietary standpoint. And then also we'll definitely touch on an area and a subject that I think a lot of people are sensitive to, but it's not talked about enough. It's kind of the elephant in the room, but it's triathletes, runners, endurance athletes, and body image, and how we see ourselves, and especially with guys, because I think that it's. Guys don't talk about it enough. I know I've got some body image, issues from being, overweight, and we'll dive into that. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, and we'll have an expert on, right?
We will have an expert on, yes.
So it won't be me making up shit.
Yeah, we're not gonna be prescribing people dog food because it's the same and they'll turn out to be awesome. Yeah, we're gonna have a professional on. We're gonna have Lizzie Miller, who's an athlete that I coach, and she's awesome, and she'll give us a lot of good information and share some of her story as we share ours.
All right, man.
All right, Mike. Good talking to you, man.
You too, buddy. All right. Catch you guys later.
See ya.